Hello everyone, I am back with another video, and today I'm sharing my top 10 games of 2022 as we ring in the new year. So I hope this video finds you well. I hope you're getting cozied on up on the couch and you have a piping hot cup of coffee just like I do, drinking out of my Be Our Guest, Beauty and the Beast mug this morning. But as I reflect on the year that was in 2022, I thought it was a great year for games. And if I would theme it around anything in particular, it was the year of surprises. It was the year of games that really flew under the radar for me. And understanding that you have games like God of War and Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West and all these other AAA titles, I feel like there was a tremendous number of games that a lot of people, even to this point, are really not talking about. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to play a number of those games, several of which are represented here in my top 10. So, coming away from this video, I hope that you're first just entertained, but I also hope that you walk away from this video with a few more games that you want to play going into 2023. But before we jump into the list, two things of note that I think are worth prefacing. The first of which, if you are not aware, I record a podcast with my brother in law. It's a gaming podcast, and we recently recorded our video talking about the year in review, sharing our top 10 games of the year, and it was a mammoth episode, 3.5 hours. So if you're into hearing about all of the stats for all the games that we played, number of games beat, hours played, detailed conversations about each of the games represented in our top 10, be sure to check out that episode. I'll put a link in the description. I also edited together a 40-minute medley kind of celebrating and capturing all of the great music from video games over the course of the year. So if any of that interests you, be sure to check that episode out. It's in the description below. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning before we get to my list is that I don't restrict myself to exclusively released games in that year. So I have games on my list that did not release in 2022 because rarely do I play 10 games in the year of release, let alone beat 10 games in the year of release. So you're going to see games, I think, dating back to 2017 on my top 10. But hey, as long as you're having fun putting these lists together, that's really all that matters. It's always meant to just be a fun exercise, reflecting on the year that was, building out your top 10 games of the year, arguing with yourself for hours, potentially figuring out whether a game should be number 3 versus number 4, and everything that goes into that list building exercise. So I hope you have your top 10 games figured out as we go into the new year. Please be sure to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear some of your favorite games over the course of the year. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into my list. All right, so to get my list started here, coming in at number 10 is Klonoa, the Phantom Reverie series. Now, this is a remastered collection of both Klonoa, Door to Phantom Isle on the PS1, and Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil on the PlayStation 2. This is a long rumored collection of games for a long dormant franchise. We've all been wanting our pal Klonoa to come back. Namco Bandai has kind of refused over the years. I think the last game we got was the Klonoa 1 remaster on the Nintendo Wii. But what I love about Klonoa is it's very reminiscent for the Kirby series for me. It's comfort food, cozy platforming that always brings a smile to your face. And I'm so thankful that more people have an opportunity now to play these games. They're accessible on pretty much all current generation platformers. And just the moment you start Klonoa Door to Phantom Isle, the Windmill song plays, you and your little pal are wandering through that first level, collecting collectibles, hopping around. It just always brings a smile to my face playing that first game. And I still feel like it holds up pretty well. If you've played something like Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, or some of those other 2.5D platforming games that you can kind of go back into the foreground, come into the foreground type of stuff, that's what you're going to find in the Klonoa games. They're really fun. They're really cozy. This was no exception. Revisiting these games was such a treat. And what was really nice is that this is the first time that I played the second game, again, that originally released on the PS2. And what I loved about that second game were those levels where you were skateboarding or snowboarding down a mountain, or just those kind of endless runner type levels that they kind of interjected, and I think were pretty prominent in the PS2 platforming era. So really enjoyed this collection again in a year that was pretty tough for me personally. A lot of difficult things going on in my life. retreating back to this collection of games was certainly a treat. And if you are interested in 3D platformers or 2.5D platformers, you cannot miss this collection. It's a must own. Number 9 on my list is a game that went under the radar for a lot of people. It was a little indie title that released in 2021. I played it as part of PlayStation Plus earlier this year, called Toem. And Toem begins in a very similar fashion to your earlier Pokemon games, like Pokemon Red and Blue, where you wake up in your bedroom and you walk out into your family room. You're greeted by your mom as she prepares you to go on this grand journey. And before you do that, she gifts you this Polaroid camera because she wants you to witness and take a photo of this phenomenon called Toem once you make your way up this mountain later in the game. And on the subject of Pokemon, it's very similar to Pokemon Snap. But in Pokemon Snap, you know if you've played it that you're on rails. You're going from point A to point B. You're rotating in this 360-degree fashion, trying to snap as many photos of these Pokemon as you can. Well, in Toem, it has this black and white graphical style, and you're wandering through these diorama, shoebox-like environments, snapping photos of bugs and animals and inanimate objects. And each time you take pictures of these things, you're often trying to complete side quests or main quests for other NPCs. And whenever you complete these quests and you go back to these characters to say, hey, here's the photo I took, they give you a little rubber stamp in this little book that you have. And this little book, every time you get a rubber stamp, it's basically a checkbox that gets you closer to the next level of the game, getting you and inching you closer to the mountain that you eventually have to climb to witness this phenomenon called Toem. But what was so wonderful and charming about Toem was just this incredibly relaxing, chill music that plays in the background as you navigate these different levels, talking to these goofy NPCs, completing these side quests. It's just a terrific time, low stress, very chill. So if you like Pokemon Snap, but you've always kind of wanted there to be a bit more freedom to navigate and wander around these levels, as you snap these photos to your heart's content, that's what you're going to find in Toem. It's a really fun time. You can beat it in about 5 to 8 hours. Again, not taxing on the brain, but brings you so much joy as you're playing it. Really enjoyed this one over the course of the year, and it's one I will probably continue to retreat to in the future just because it's so wholesome and so fun. So if you haven't played Toem, definitely worth checking out. Number 8 on my list is a game that had a sequel released this year, but I could not play the sequel until I played the first game, and that is A Plague Tale: Innocence. This is a very dark, very grim, third-person action-adventure game set in the mid-1300s France, where you're playing as this young girl named Amicia, and her young brother has recently become deathly ill, so you go on this adventure trying to find a doctor, trying to find a cure for him. But in a very Last of Us-like fashion, you're wandering these linear-like levels. There are guards all around you, and you're trying to, in a very stealth-like fashion, take out each of these guards one by one, progress through the story, live to fight another day. There's going to be a lot of crafting to equip this hook shot that you have, or this slingshot, I should say. And you have to use the environment to your advantage. There is some environmental puzzle solving, but it mostly involves these guards walking around with lanterns. And as the name of the game would imply, a plague tale, there are rats everywhere infesting these streets. So as these guards are walking around, you equip this little slingshot, try and knock out the guards' lanterns as the rats then infest these different guards. It's an opportunity for you to progress further in the level, make your way to the next story beat. I didn't feel like this one overstayed its welcome. I always wanted to know what was going to happen next and figure out if we were going to find our cure for our young brother Hugo. But if you like very character, story-driven adventures like the more recent Naughty Dog type games, I think this is one you definitely have to add to your list. You can get it from most current generation platforms, and definitely left me wanting more, and I'm looking forward to playing its sequel in A Plague Tale: Requiem, hopefully sometime next year. Number 7 on my list is a game that has been in my backlog for way too long, and that's Golf Story on the Nintendo Switch. Now, I'm a tremendous fan of golf games. Love the Hot Shots Golf series on the PlayStation 2, but I also loved the Camelot developed Mario Sports titles during the Game Boy Advance GameCube era. Mario Golf Advance Tour and Toadstool Tour on the GBA and GameCube respectively But it was Advanced Tour that I particularly fell in love with when the developers interjected these RPG like mechanics. You got the player freedom of creating your own character. You allocated these experience points after you completed each game of golf to stuff like power and accuracy. And just that gameplay loop of playing a ton of rounds of golf, boosting up your character was such a fun time. But I gotta be honest, I've been disappointed in the more recent Mario Golf titles because I just don't feel like that same love and care is put into the development of those games. The 3DS one really didn't do it for me, and more recently, Mario Golf on the Switch I thought was really just okay. But look no further if you're looking to recreate that old school, I say old school, Mario Golf Advance Tour on the Game Boy Advance type of experience than Golf Story on the Switch. It's so much fun. While you don't get to create your own character, the developers have already penned a story that's super goofy. It's fun to go through. The writing was literally laugh out loud funny. I enjoyed it so much. My only criticism of the game is it does kind of overstay its welcome. Took me about 15 hours to beat. Around that 8 to 10 hour mark, I was like, okay, let's kind of wrap it up here just because by then I don't think the game stretches itself or introduces any new gameplay mechanics. But the minute gameplay, playing these rounds of golf, it's the 3 button click system that you've probably become accustomed to in Mario Golf and the Hot Shots series. Very newcomer friendly in that sense. There are some tutorials in the beginning of the game to kind of help introduce you to the finer mechanics of the game. But after that, you're kind of left up to your own devices, completing side quests for people. There are 8 different areas or 8 different courses that you'll go on. So, in that sense, they mix up the gameplay variety and the different terrains really well. And again, the main highlight is the RPG mechanics that were in some of those earlier Mario Golf titles are here in Golf Story, but the writing is the real winner in this game. It's goofy, it's so much fun, and I just had such a great time playing this during the summer months. So if you like the Hot Shots golf games, if you like the earlier Mario Golf titles, look no further. Golf Story is such a good game and well worth adding to your Switch collection. Number 6 on my list is a game that I was really anticipating coming into this year. It's a sequel to one of my favorite games from a few years ago, and that's Horizon Forbidden West. Now, surprising absolutely no one, this game is a graphical stunner. It looks incredible on the PlayStation 5. I think it does a tremendous job showcasing the graphical fidelity and power of that console. And I don't think I have much to say about this that you probably haven't already heard or that would surprise you that you've read about out on the internet. It's a great sophomore outing for Aloy and seeing how her story continues into this sequel of a game. Gameplay wise, I don't think they change up the finer gameplay mechanics in any significant way, but I don't think they really needed to because going around these environments, riding on these different mechanical beasts, and taking out all these mechanical dinosaurs with your bow and arrow is as fun as it's ever been. There's a lot more enemy variety in this game, which I think was a criticism with Zero Dawn, the first game in this series. And I think they really did a great job with this one, mixing up that a little bit. And what's always been most fascinating to me about Horizon and the world that they've created with that is just 1,000 years after this apocalypse has happened and the world has kind of reset itself with these tribal cultures and all of the nuance that goes into these warring factions and why one tribe is going against the other. That's the type of stuff that I think is most interesting to me. I think what was a bit disappointing with Horizon Forbidden West for me was its narrative. I just never felt like the overarching story there was as compelling as Zero Dawn. And it goes into some kind of strange sci fi directions that are interesting, but I personally thought were very predictable. And towards the end, I was kind of anticipating certain things to happen. And so when those things that I expected to happen actually happened, it was like, well, yeah, I kind of expected that. Little disappointing in that sense, but I think that the minute to minute gameplay is still so satisfying and fun that I kept playing for more. I ended up getting the platinum trophy in this one. I played it for 50 hours. I love Aloy. I think she's just an incredible protagonist. And I think the developers certainly set up a third game in this series. So I'm looking forward to seeing where the story goes. But again, my main criticism of this one was its narrative. I just didn't think it was as compelling as the first. But if you like Zero Dawn, you're going to love Forbidden West. It really is a great game. And the minutes of gameplay is just so much fun. All right, we're getting into my top 5 games of 2022. And coming in at number 5, this is a game that I just snuck in at the tail end of the year. I got about a week into December and I thought, are there any games that I should try and play before I really finalize my game of the year list? And this one, I'm glad I snuck in because it certainly is a contender, and that's why it's at number 5. That's Tunic. Now, this released earlier in the year as an Xbox exclusive. It is since released on the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation consoles as well. And this is a game where you play as an adorable little fox. It's a Zelda-like adventure. And, you probably are well aware nowadays that there are tons of Zelda-like games out there. There are a dime a dozen. But what I think distinguishes Tunic apart from those other games is its commitment to not holding your hand. Nowadays, I feel like every game holds your hand, tells you exactly where you need to go, what you need to do. There's some narrator or side protagonist telling you where you need to go and how you need to complete puzzles and quests. Tunic doesn't do that. You wake up on this beachfront playing as this fox, and there's no hand holding. There's no telling you, hey, now you need to go here, then you need to go there. This is how you complete this puzzle. This is how you need to complete this quest. There's none of that. And as you begin exploring this world and navigating these different environments, you begin to pick up these little white pieces of paper. And these white pieces of paper are the actual manual to the game, detailed in beautiful color. And as you pick these up, you begin to decipher the world. You begin to understand what all of these collectibles, what these different items do to help facilitate and complete different quests, tell you where you need to go onto the map, but you still have to make sense of it. There's a lot of deciphering going on as you discover these different pieces of paper around the world. And I just applaud the developer for their commitment to that, but also the level of detail that goes into the lore and creating this own language that is specific to Tunic. It's really unlike anything you'll play this year, and it's very unlike any of the other Zelda likes that are out there this year. It's rare that you come across games nowadays that don't hold your hand, and I think Tunic does it gracefully, it does it well. And I will also tell you though, this game is challenging. Because it doesn't hold your hand, you might get frustrated at times. The combat can be a little bit finicky. It's tough. It's Souls-like in that sense. Some of these bosses will kick your butt, but I think that level of perseverance and overcoming those difficult bosses, getting a pad and paper out and kind of scribbling notes down and trying to make sense and solve these puzzles is a tremendous amount of fun. I love Tunic. I think other people will too if you give it a chance. And I just loved exploring that world and discovering all of its secrets with that adorable little fox. So I strongly encourage all of you, if you're into those Zelda-like isometric perspective type games, you cannot miss Tunic. It is definitely one of the best games that came out this year. Coming in at number 4 is a game that will probably surprise people. Now, it's worth saying that Elden Ring is nowhere to be seen on my top 10. Not because I didn't enjoy it, and not because I didn't play it. I put 50 hours into Elden Ring earlier this year, and I enjoyed every minute of its punishing world and everything it had to offer. But because I didn't roll credits, I thought it would be disingenuous to include it on my top 10. But thankfully, I played another FromSoft game earlier this year, and that was Demon Souls Remake. Now, I bought this at the launch of the PS5. I just never got around to playing it, but I'm so glad I did this year, and I just applaud Bluepoint Games, the developer who took on this remake and recreating that original PS3 game, because they just bring this game to next generation life graphically. But you have to applaud them for also not really messing around with the finer gameplay mechanics of the original that released on PS3. And it was so incredible to see not only where this franchise got its humble beginnings on PS3, but how what's become a literal genre in games nowadays in Souls-like with this punishing gameplay loop. And Demon Souls Remake just does a fantastic job of creating that gameplay loop, of being introduced to these punishing bosses like the Flame Lurker, like the Armored Spider, like so many, like the Tower Knight in the very beginning of the game. And you walk into these boss battles and you just get your butt handed to you, but you persevere, you overcome, you have to study these bosses and understand their finer movements so that you can counteract that with your own. And when you slay these things and you take them out, there is no other series that captures that level of satisfaction like the Souls games, and Demon Souls is no exception with this remake. I really encourage people to pick this up. I think it certainly is deserving of going out and picking up a PS5 to play this game. Its graphical fidelity and power certainly shows what the PS5 is capable of, but seeing where this series got its humble beginnings is really something to behold. So, if you're into the Souls-like series and for whatever reason you haven't played Demon Souls, this is the definitive way to play the game, and I had a terrific time. The last thing I'll say, I think these big games are best played with a friend. I play them alongside my brother-in-law, and when he kind of creates his own character, I kind of create mine, and we're texting each other back and forth day after day of, hey, I beat this boss my first time, or I can't beat this boss, it's kicking my ass type of thing. It just makes for a really fun kind of back and forth experience. So, Demon Souls Remake, fantastic game, looks incredible. Had just such a blast playing this year, and that's why it's number 4 on my list. All right, as we get into my top 3 games of the year, this one coming in at number 3 in particular is without a doubt the most special game I played in 2022. And if there's one game you take away from this video that you write down and say, I have to pick up and play going into 2023, it has to be this one. This is a little indie title that I think flew under the radar for a lot of people. It certainly did for me. Came out just a few short months ago, and that's a 3D platformer called Tinykin. Now, if you followed my YouTube channel or my podcast for any number of years, you'll know I'm a tremendous fan of 3D platformers, my favorite genre in video games. And I love the Mario 64s and Mario Galaxies just as much as the next person. When you jump into a world or a level, you collect a star, it spits you back out, you jump back in, rinse and repeat. But my favorite 3D platformers are the ones like DK64, Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. When you go into these different worlds, there's collectibles scattered and littered across the level that you can explore and collect to your heart's content. And that's the kind of 3D platformer that Tinykin is. But to set the stage, if you're unfamiliar with the game, you play as this little cartoon character named Milo. And he's an astronaut. He wants to explore other planets and see if there are other life forms out there. Lo and behold, he crash lands into a house set in the 1990s. So if you've played something like Gone Home and you wander around this house and you pick up VHS tapes and vinyl records and you see CRT TVs and Super Nintendo manuals and everything you'd expect to see when exploring a house in the 1990s, those are the types of inanimate objects you're going to have to navigate, jump on, and help to explore a variety of levels throughout this house in Tinykin. Now, one of the gameplay mechanics, the gimmicks, if you will, that a lot of people are talking about and comparing it to is Pikmin. Now, I've never played Pikmin on the GameCube and some of the successor games and later Nintendo consoles, but you collect these little bug things that are very Pikmin-like in design, and you use them to help navigate these environments. Some of them you use as kind of a ladder to kind of boost yourself up and jump on a shelf. Some of them you use to kind of explode crates that drop down yarn that you can use as a shortcut to help climb up a level later on. And I'll kind of leave it at that because I don't want to explore all of the finer little details that you use to help navigate these worlds. But what was most impressive and most surprising going into this game was when you go into this bedroom of sorts as a level. And when you walk in, you just see collectibles everywhere. And the game so masterfully nudges you to each corner of the map to clear it out, collect all the collectibles, and everywhere you turn, there's more collectibles to collect. And that gameplay loop was so satisfying, and perhaps most surprising, there's no combat. There's no enemies to be seen. You don't fight anyone. There's no Bowsers that you have to jump on their head 3 times. None of that. You just collect, and you do it to the tune of some incredible music that's very reminiscent of those 3D platformers of the N64 era. It is such a treat to play. One of my favorite games of this year. I think this might be one of the best 3D platformers we've seen in the past decade. It's really that good, has quickly climbed my list as being one of my favorite 3D platformers ever. If you're into 3D platformers, you cannot miss this game. You have to play it. You can get it on all current generation consoles. I implore you, Tinykin is such a gem, and I had the absolute time of my life playing it earlier this year. Number 2 on my list, maybe to the surprise of no one, it had to sneak in here somehow, right? God of War Ragnarok. Of course, the sequel to 2018 God of War, kind of a reimagining, a rebooting of Kratos as a character, his son Atreus kind of going on that journey with you. And the interesting thing about God of War Ragnarok, and I think why it resonated with me most, if you'll kind of bear with me as I tell a quick story, is that I didn't play the 2018 God of War at launch like many people did. It wasn't my game of the year. I actually didn't play it until years later. I remember watching my brother in law play the first 6 to 7 hours of it when it initially launched back in 2018. I didn't pick it up until 2020. And when I had a small stint streaming on Twitch, I played some of the game while streaming. Not a great game to play or start your Twitch streaming career because there's so much side conversation going on that you can easily miss if you're not locked into that experience. So I missed out on a lot of that. I did end up going back and playing it in 2021, and it was one of my favorite games played last year. But I didn't play it the way the developers intended it because a lot of those main story beats were spoiled for me. I missed out on a lot of the early game dialogue that kind of helps to set the foundation for that story and characters going forward. And I did not want to make that same mistake with God of War Ragnarok, this sequel in the series. So I beat it in a week. I sat down, no interruptions, no distractions. I had no podcasts, Twitch streams, or anything else up while I was playing it. I was just locked into that 30-hour journey and seeing where Kratos and Atreus' story goes, all of the twists and turns and everything in between. And I think this game is just on another level, particularly with its narrative. The final few hours are crazy, bombastic, unpredictable, and satisfying as all get out. Definitely my 2022 game of the year in terms of games that released in 2022. And I think the writers at Santa Monica Studios are truly just in a league of their own. The writing for Kratos, Atreus, and a lot of those supporting cast of characters is phenomenal. But the performances, especially Christopher Judge as he reprises his role as Kratos, out of this world. Certainly deserving of that game award for best performance. And I think he earned every minute of his speech up there on the stage if you were able to catch that. But God of War Ragnarok, perhaps to the surprise of no one, is an incredible follow up to an already outstanding game from 2018, and one that I would encourage other people to play sooner rather than later so you don't have any of those main story beats spoiled for you. All right, now before I mention my number one game of 2022, I want to go back to what I said at the start of the video. This being a year of surprises, particularly as it relates to games and how I discovered a lot of games I didn't anticipate, flew under the radar, were tremendous surprises. This was also a surprising year with some of the stuff that my wife and I went through earlier in the year, particularly during the spring and summer months. I'll spare you the details, but it was tough. We went through some really challenging trials, if you will, as it relates to homeownership. And I just needed something to retreat to, a world to get lost in. And there was a series that really came through for me this year, a series that I had written off for years because of its annual installments, because of just being tired of what it had evolved into. And I just didn't really think that there was much joy to be had with that series. And before I even mention it, something I want to say, because some people might roll their eyes when I mention it and I start talking about how much joy it brought me over the course of the year. Play what you love and don't feel like you need to justify or explain away games that bring you joy and games that you enjoy playing. Play that stuff unapologetically and just enjoy it, right? That's what video games are meant to be. And this series in particular is one that I consistently retreated to, got lost in, and had an absolute blast with. And that's the Assassin's Creed series. And the game that is my game of the year is Assassin's Creed Origins. This is the one that was a reimagining and kind of rebooting for the series. Back in the Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood days, you were this assassin kind of stealthily making your way around these environments, taking out all these people. With Origins back in 2017, it was meant to kind of be a reboot for the series, kind of creating these giant open worlds, interjecting all of this RPG type stuff for your character. I put 70 hours into this game. I explored every inch of ancient Egypt that you could, and I just enjoyed every minute of it. I got the platinum trophy. And what surprised me most about Origins and some of the other games I played in the series this year was how compelling some of the storytelling was. I think Origins has not only the best story in Assassin's Creed, I think it has some of the most memorable character moments and character building in an Assassin's Creed game. And some people, or for some people, that bar might be kind of low, but I'm telling you, incredible character moments that rivaled some of the other AAA games that I played this year, including God of War and including A Plague Tale Innocence. And if you're not familiar with the story, you play as Bayek and Aya, this married couple. On the onset of the game, their child is murdered, and so they kind of go on this revenge tour over the course of its 30-hour story, trying to exact revenge on the people that were responsible for killing their son. But what was most surprising to me is just how that journey shapes and unintentionally shakes up their marriage, and how that felt so authentic and non-video gamey and authentic to real life was really surprising to me. And at the very end of the game, to see the origins, as the name of the game would imply, of the actual creed that you end up seeing Ezio joining in Assassin's Creed 2. And in addition to that, there's a montage where you get to understand and see where that signature Assassin's Creed emblem comes from. Major hype. Just so freaking cool and awesome. And I just fell in love with it. Exploring ancient Egypt was an absolute blast. If you even have remotely similar fascination with ancient Egypt as I do, exploring pyramids, wandering around the world on a camel or horseback, scaling the pyramids of Giza, it's so cool. If that sounds of interest to you, these Assassin's Creed games are stupid cheap nowadays. Why not? Give it a try, check it out. I would highly encourage you to do so. It's my game of the year for so many reasons, and I'm actually planning a video series talking about getting back into the Assassin's Creed series if for whatever reason you fell off playing it way back when, or if you've never played an Assassin's Creed game, some of the greatest jumping on points. I think Origins is one of them. But really, it's just the Assassin's Creed series in general that is my game of the year. Retreating to those worlds, getting lost in these different time periods was so much fun. I had a blast, and I would encourage other people to consider giving the series another chance if you, like so many others, have given up on it over the years. But for all the reasons I've explained and many more, that's why Origins is my game of the year, and I can't wait to continue going back and playing some of the DLC that I still have to clean up going forward. But that's my games of the year. That's my top 10. I hope you found this enjoyable. Like I said at the beginning, I hope you find a couple of games that you can take away and play in 2023. I'm looking at Tinykin, Tunic, Toem, the Klonoa Phantom Reverie series. There was just so many great games in 2022, many of which I haven't even had the opportunity to play yet. But please get at me in the comments. What did you think about this video? What were some of your favorite games of 2022? I can't wait to hear from you, and I'm really looking forward to putting out more videos deep into 2023. If you go to my channel, you can see I've started to kind of rebrand my name. The Aria Lewis 2011 era has been laid to rest. This new era for my videos and my content creating is going to be a little bit different going forward. A lot of love for 3D platformers and RPGs, so I hope you'll stick around. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a very happy new year, and I hope you play some great games to ring in the new year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.